Hello and welcome to this edition of Capture. I'm Landon Troca. The team here at Capture has worked diligently to keep you informed on everything going on with the presidential primaries. Today, we'd like to further those conversations, bringing you a special panel featuring representatives from both sides of the aisle, as well as one from here on campus. Let's meet the panelists. First, Mario Guerra, treasurer of the California GOP and the former mayor of Downey. Next, Eric Baumann, vice chair of the California Democratic Party and chair of the Los Angeles Democratic Party. And finally, Dr. Alex Heineman, an adjunct professor of history and political science here at APU. Mr. Guerra, I'll start with you. This election cycle has been especially contentious on the Republican side. Have you experienced the same here in California? Have you noticed the same thing that is being experienced throughout the country in regards to party division?
Well, first of all, it's really exciting. A presidential election is always exciting for the entire country. If you don't get excited about this, then something's going on. You need some heartbeat. But in California, we've been focusing on a lot of different things. We've been focusing on turning our party around, for example. After the 2012 election, the Republican Party in California had pretty much hit rock bottom. And then some things happened in 2014. 3 Democratic senators were indicted or convicted. And all of a sudden, we found an opening to break the supermajority. We did that in November 2014. And because of that, last year, we saved about $20 billion in taxes that we were able to stop from being passed in California. So the Republican Party has done a good job of taking seats that belong to LA County, for example. We took the first time in 30 years, we took incumbents out. So we're concentrating on holding what we have and working at the local level and building the party up from the bottom up on there. So we're continuing to move forward, and the presidential rhetoric sometimes gets in the way of what we're trying to accomplish here locally.
So locally, have you experienced the same sort of rhetoric that's being shown in the presidential election?
Well, no, we haven't experienced it, but it hurts everybody. You know, when you start putting immigrants against immigrants, and you start talking about some of the words and words matter. And how you talk to people matters. And in California, we've been working hard to make sure that we've been very inclusive on there, so it paints us with a different brush on there. And so sometimes it does have that impact on us. But you know what? We've done a good job to reaching out and being very inclusive in our party.
Great, thank you so much. Mr. Baumann, Hillary Clinton owns a strong lead in the delegate count, but still, with millennials, Bernie Sanders has seen a meteoric rise in popularity. Have you seen the same groundswell in support for Sanders here in California that's been seen throughout the country?
Unquestionably. The great thing for Democrats is we have 2 candidates who have sparked such incredible interest in the presidential race, that have brought so much energy and excitement in, that no matter which of our candidates gets the nomination, our party will be so energized and so ready for November. Here in California, look, California is a Democratic state. We will gain back everything we lost last year and then some in the Democratic presidential year, because turnout is so much stronger for Democrats in California. What's most important for us is keeping engaged all those new voters that Bernie Sanders brought in the primary elections. And that's going to be our work of art, is doing that in November.
Great, thank you so much. Mr. Heineman, this election cycle has brought us a couple of non-traditional candidates in Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. What do you think the reasons for these candidates appearing virtually out of left field is? How do you think they've managed to be so successful? And do you think these candidates could do better in America? Or do you think frustration with the establishment has led citizens to support candidates who could potentially damage our country?
Well, I think the reality of it is, America's endured a lot of stuff for a long time. I don't think anytime you have a system, the system's sort of holding still. I don't think this is anything new than, 1984, 1896. The system actually contains a lot of this political action and exciting stuff. However, both parties are reflecting a real sort of groundswell of outsider sentiment that I think is really new and different. But the Constitution is meant to take ideology and turn it into public policy. And as long as it's able to move people to be moderate, then it'll be okay. But the reality of it is that we have a real sort of difficult period right now to overcome in that regard.
I just want to point out, you said two candidates coming from out of left field. One came from out of left field. One definitely comes from out of right field.
Well, that's part of the argument that he didn't come from right field, too.
Well, you guys own him, you have him.
You know what? Part of I'll tell you what, people are energized, but here's the difference in the two parties. There are the Republican Party has seen 67% more voter turnout in all the primaries. The Democratic Party has seen a 27% decrease. They're having some issues on there. You have people are upset. People are upset at the promises that they made in the elected officials on there. So people want something new and are looking for change on there. That may not be the answer for everybody. There, Bernie Sanders on one side and Donald Trump. But you have Hillary Clinton. The Democratic base has said, 86% said that Hillary Clinton can't be trusted. This is from the Dem Zone poll. So you have that fight going on just internally about who we want. But it's not always the popular thing. You got to remember, you got a 68 election, you got Richard Nixon that wasn't very popular, and then you got the Democrats put Hubert Humphrey. The Democrats didn't really want Humphrey. He was a nice man, but they really wanted Robert Kennedy, and he had just been killed. So sometimes you have elections that are going to come again, two polarizing figures. Hillary and Donald, right now, you've never had an election with two people with higher unfavorables coming up. So it's going to be interesting.
Hope is eternal among some votes. I will point out that Hillary Clinton has garnered more votes across all the primaries than any other candidate for president in the United States today. Okay. A million more votes, by the way.
Right.
All right, and as we're talking about Mrs. Clinton, we'll take a turn and look at some of the women in politics. So currently, we only saw 2 women in the field of 23 presidential candidates. Overall, women just account for 19.4% of Congress and 24.7% of statewide elective and 24.5% of state legislatures, per the Center for American Women in Politics at Rutgers University. All the while, steps are being taken to involve millennials in the conversation for equality, such as He for She campaign. What can be done to bring more women into the election process?
You know, I'm glad you asked that. In California, right now, the head of the Republican Senate is Senator Jean Fuller. Okay, up until a few months ago, the head of the Assembly in California for the Republicans on there was Assemblywoman Christine Olson. So our 2 leaders have been women. We have a higher percentage, people don't think about that, we have a higher percentage of elected officials as women than the Democratic Party in our caucus, both in our Assembly and in our Senate. So you know what, we need to make sure that we're inclusive, that we talk about the issues, and I'm not quite sure what the answer is to that. I just know that we're a party that wants to continue to make progress in those areas.
Well, truthfully, as the gender gap goes, women tend to vote Democratic. And part of it is because of important issues like the stances of the parties on women's health care choices. It makes a huge difference. The stances that the parties have on single moms and how they survive and raise their children in this day and age. The stances that the parties have on health care, which is very important to mothers. The standards that we have and the values that we have on providing education, a free, high-quality public education for all kids. That's the reason why women in California vote for Democrats 56%. And our campaigns are always oriented towards that. I will point out that the Speaker of the Assembly until 1 week ago was a woman on the Democratic side, the highest ranking legislator in the state of California.
Dr. Heineman?
Sure. No, I think it's an important question. I think women are grossly underrepresented in our political system overall, but the parties are trying to adapt. I mean, it's the first time that you've had women on both sides in the primary that are making a real effort to move forward and real change and really giving voice to a lot of things that aren't being spoken of, so it's good.
Thank you. And now we'll turn to another important voting bloc, and that's the millennials, who now make up the largest generation in the United States, surpassing baby boomers, and now with a population of over 83 million. How important is the millennial turnout to this election cycle? Would a large turnout in the California primary in June have a significant impact?
Well, the answer is yes. And unfortunately, the millennial voting percentage keeps going down. And millennials need to embrace this and take this election on there and see their points being heard. But it's also very important that the number one issue for millennials is 73% says they're worried about jobs after college, for example. Okay, and number 2, how they're going to pay their student loans. So we need to be realistic and have that discussion on there. Talking about free college for everyone on there doesn't make sense if you don't find a plan to pay for it. Okay, sounds great. It sounds you're catering to the base. But here, like for example, at Azusa Pacific, this is a Christian college. It's a private school. Bernie Sanders getting in won't have one iota of impact on that. We do need to, you had like Senator Rubio though, talking about the impact of student loans because he came from that generation and had a lot of student loans and student debt. I have a lot of student debt. My kids have a lot of student debt there for schools. But you know what? So we need to make sure it's more affordable and we need to make sure to work with that. But look at the issues of millennials, and this is the time for the millennials to step up. This is a great example for it.
I think I have to disagree with Mario about millennial turnout. Millennial turnout has actually gone up, not down. In 2008, Barack Obama was elected on the strength of young voters. It was the largest turnout of voters under 30 in American history. In 2012, everybody said young voters would not turn out again for him, and in fact, they turned out 16% higher than they did in 2008. And right now, when you see millennial participation on the Democratic side, all across America, it's extraordinary. And why? Because we are talking about how do we get kids out of college debt-free. We are talking about things that matter to them. And by the way, we're talking about social equality, which for millennials is incredibly important. Because you know what? Most 20-year-olds today don't want to argue about marriage equality. They don't want to argue about abortion rights. They don't want to argue about immigrant rights. When you talk to a 19 or a 20-year-old today, they don't want to talk about building walls to Mexico. They want to talk about building relationships to Mexico. And that's the difference in the debate between Democrats and Republicans. We really connect on a much better level, and that's why you see the millennial activity on the Democratic side that you really do not see on the Republican side.
But by the way, as a percentage on there, the millennial voting percentage still keeps going down. It went down from 35%, it went down to 28%. And you might have more millennials.
In what year?
On there, you're going from 2008 to 2012. The percentage, you had more millennials coming. Millennials will be the largest voting bloc in a couple years on there in the generation. But as a voting bloc, as a percentage, it actually went down.
Fortunately, they're Democrats.
All right, now we'll turn. We have some millennials here that we can turn to. I'll toss to my co-host, Faith Vandervoort, for our next part of our discussion.
Thanks, Landon. At this time, we'd like to open up the floor for some student questions from some of our audience here. Our first question comes from Hovsep.
Hi, my name is Hovsep, and I'm the president of the Political Awareness Club on campus. And my question to you today is, if your party's candidate is elected, how will that affect us college students, and how will that look different than if the opposing party's candidate was elected?
Well, first of all, thank you for being here and thank you for being involved and thank you for asking that question on there. I think that's going to be the biggest issue is your involvement. You know what President John F. Kennedy said, good thoughts without actions are worthless, okay? And he also said, you know what, on there, ask what your country can do for, ask what I can do for your country, not what your country can do for you. So we need to look at the mentality of what is it that if we have a fair playing base, what are we looking to do as a country? And it's not so much what's in it for me, what's going to be happening for our future as a country for everything else. You know what? I could tell you that if the Democratic Party, if Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton get in, I could tell you you're going to pay higher taxes. You're going to pay higher taxes in California. You're going to have the national defense is going to continue to be a little bit scary from what we've had on there. Those are proven records of what we have. You're going to have a lot, by his own admission, Bernie Sanders, which will probably be, by the way, a third party candidate, in my opinion, if he doesn't get the nominee. But you're going to be looking at a lot of issues that are important to you that you need to look at. Now, with the Republican side, I can tell you, the economy is always going to be the most important thing for you. What kind of jobs? Good paying jobs. On their national defense, ISIS, controlling the borders, and those different things. You know what? I was one of the first Republicans to come out on immigration reform. Okay, so I understand that we need to have the empathy on that, but we need to secure our borders, not just the north borders, but not just the south border, but the north border. So we need to talk about those issues on there. And all I ask is, please make informed decisions. Read up on the candidate. Don't look at the rhetoric. Don't look at the words on there. Look exactly how we're going to pay for things and what those plans are going to be.
I have to just take 1 second and point out that the best economies in the last 50 years all occurred under Democrats as president. Bill Clinton left office with the largest budget surplus in American history and the best economy we'd ever had. Barack Obama dug us out of the hole that George W. Bush put us in, which was the largest hole in American history. So let's not have fantasy talk about who did what, and by the way, it was Democrats who got Osama bin Laden as well. in terms of militarization, wars have occurred on the Republican side, not on the Democratic side. We've been left to clean up the mess that you guys created. Here's what the difference is. If a Democratic president gets elected, they will actually listen to what your concerns are. They will actually be focused on what your concerns are. And I think Barack Obama has proven that, and Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders certainly share those sentiments. And the reality is, when you have an obstructionist Congress that will not pass any legislation, it makes it very hard, and presidents end up having to govern by executive authority, which is a very tough place to be when we have real problems that have to be solved.
You had a President Obama for 2 years, had the Senate and the Congress. He had a control of the legislative branch and the executive branch on there. What happened to immigration reform? It didn't happen, right? That's why we have Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, because we make promises that we don't keep, and even when we have the power and the control to do so.
All right, gentlemen, let's move on to the next question, Faith.
Okay, so now we're going to switch gears a bit to more environment questions. Here's Jamie with the second question.
Hi, my name is James Warren, and I'm a senior political science student and the founder of our school's Environmental Sustainability Club. My question is, we've seen over the past 120 years 0.8 degrees Celsius rise in global temperatures, and those temperatures are expected to continue to rise by 4 to 7 degrees Celsius per the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change over the next 100 years. This is a truth that's happening. The scientific consensus is behind it. What do you believe must be done going forward in order to prevent the catastrophic consequences that are predicted with such a global temperature rise?
Well, I tell you, and that's a great question on there. I do believe, the United States is 5% of the population of the world, okay? So we do have an impact, but we don't control it all. I think what you need to look at is also working with the countries that are highest polluters on there for the world, on there, China and India. So having relationship with those countries and continue to make progress towards climate change and pollution on there are very important. But there's no law that I've seen that you could pass that's going to make an immediate impact without taking away jobs. Okay? And that's the problem. Let's find that balance on there. The United States can't do it alone. That's why we have to work on a global economy, and you have to look at it at the countries and having relationship and having intelligent discussions, not putting down other countries. That's why I think it's so important for us not to be an isolationist country where some of the rhetoric that continues to go on right now. So working together is one of the ways we have to do it.
I'd say that the very first thing you have to do is have a party that believes that climate change is real. And the Republican Party writ large does not. They deny its existence. They don't believe that the use of petrochemical fuels is undermining our world. They don't understand that the reason we're having a drought, the reason that we're having the climatic weather that we're having all across the world is because of climate change. So you can't fix the problem if you don't first admit that you have the problem. And by the way, the international conference that was held in Paris just 2 months ago brought together leaders from across the world, from across the United States, and especially a tremendous bipartisan team from California, where many Republicans actually do believe in climate change. And there was extraordinary discussion and work about how to deal with third world countries on this issue, the largest polluting countries like China and India and others. But that said, you have to start off by a fundamental belief that this is a problem, and you have to understand that in tackling problems and creating solutions, the existing economy and job world is going to change. But what you have to do is stay at the cutting edge of that and at the forefront of that. And that, by the way, speaks to the whole problem with our economy to begin with. We're not a factory economy anymore. We're not an agricultural economy anymore. We're a cutting edge biotech, high-tech economy. We're a service economy. We're a healthcare economy. And we have to understand that and continue to support those industries so that when you guys graduate, you actually can get out and get jobs that pay enough for you to pay your college loans.
Some of the toughest environmental laws in the state of California were signed by Governor Schwarzenegger, a Republican governor on there. And today we're seeing some progress on some of those things there. Water in the state of California, okay, is a big issue. Will always be. We're a desert on there. But you know what? We didn't create the problem on there. We're just not doing enough about it. We're not doing any storing of water. This is a problem that's been going on for 25 years, and the Democrats have been in power, the state of California, for 25 years, and yet why are we not storing water? Why are we now saying, hey, we got to capture some of that water? Those are the issues. Let's figure it out how to fix it together.
All right, it sounds like you two agree on that. Let's go back to Faith for another student question.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Fix the problem. We're agreeing. We're both agreeing on that.
With the way the GOP primary continues to shape up, especially now that Marco Rubio recently dropped out, how would it work for California state delegates if it moved into a contested convention?
Well, from the Republican side, we have 172 delegates. You need 1,237 to get the Republican nomination. In California, our delegates are winner take all by congressional district. Okay, so for example, even any district on their congressional district has 3 delegates, and that's going to be it. So even if you're in a very liberal, Santa Monica, if you're in South Central Los Angeles, if you're Maxine Waters district, you get 3 Republicans in there, you get 3 delegates. If you're in Orange County and Congressman Ed Royce on their very Republican base on there, you get 3. So we're going to have an impact on that. And you know what? There's a big difference. California delegates, you're pledged on the first vote. So that's the big difference is there are a lot of states that have voted just now that aren't pledged votes. So you go into the convention, if he doesn't have, Mr. Trump doesn't have 1,237, you have a lot of states that cannot pledge or not give that on the second ballot. So yes, it's the contested convention is very realistic. And you know what, I can tell you that the party will follow its own rules. So if he gets 1,237 delegates, he's going to be the party nominee.
But you know, we all need to be worried about the kind of language and rhetoric that he used just yesterday on national television when he said that if he's 100 votes short and they don't give it to him, there could be danger, there could be trouble. That is very troubling rhetoric. That is rhetoric that should frighten all of us.
And I agree with that. I agree with that.
Because the Republican Party, just like the Democratic Party, has a very specific process about their conventions and have had brokered conventions before. But you can't have somebody who threatens violence, threatens literally riots in the streets. That's not a good way to do this.
Here's the biggest difference between the Republican and the Democrats on there. They have these things called the superdelegates, which are usually elected official or party officials on there, and that will sway any election. If the Republican Party had superdelegates, I could tell you that most likely Donald Trump would not be the nominee. So that's just something that's just built into our party rules. So.
Right.
All right, let's quickly address our last question.
Right, so Mr. Guerra, you just very briefly mentioned the possibility of a third party candidate. And our third question has to deal with that. So here's Jared.
I'm Jared Pine, a Spanish major. Thank you all for being here on the panel. And my question is, you mentioned earlier the high disapproval range for both Hillary and Donald. Is this the year that maybe someone from a third party can make a significant run, maybe not win the nomination, but get farther than what we've seen in the past?
I personally feel Bernie Sanders has money. Bernie Sanders has the excitement. Bernie Sanders, I don't believe with his policies, but I believe Bernie Sanders is a good man. And his favorables are a lot higher than anybody else left in the race on there, with the exception of maybe John Kasich. So I do firmly believe, I think there's more of a chance of Bernie Sanders being a third party candidate than there would be of Donald Trump if he didn't get the nomination. That's my personal views. But yeah, he's going to be around. Remember, Hillary didn't drop off until June when running against President Obama. And she was well funded on there, even though it always looked like President Obama was going to be the candidate for the Democrat. So I see Bernie Sanders sticking around a while, and I see Bernie Sanders, that possibility and that groundswell of him possibly being a third party candidate. My personal opinion on there, I don't have any other facts. In discussion with different politicians, I can tell you this, in talking to state legislators, Democratic state legislators in the last few days in Sacramento, I can tell you, that I'm not going to tell you who they are on there, I don't want to get them in trouble with Eric, but I can tell you they're just not that excited about either one of the two. Okay, so I mean, when it comes down to it, Eric and everybody else are going rah, 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 this is our Democratic candidate, but I can tell you they're both looking at it like, really? And I can tell you a lot of Republicans are looking like, really? Okay. So, hey, Marco Rubio was a great young man that's going to be a great leader in our country. He's got a bright future on there, and his policies hopefully will continue to move over into the rest of the Republican field.
I usually find Mario to be one of the sunniest Republicans I know, but today he's very cynical. Bernie Sanders is not going to do a third-party run. The third-party run is going to be Donald Trump when they don't let him get the nomination. And notwithstanding having signed the pledge, he keeps giving the hint that he's going to do it. We had this happen in 1992, and Bill Clinton became the president because of it.
Because of Ross Perot, correct.
And
Right.
if you have Donald Trump and another Republican and Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, the Democrat's going to be the next president, unquestionably.
I agree with that. I agree with that too.
All right. That'll do it for our discussion today. A special thank you to our panelists for joining us, as well as our student audience. And I'll pass along what our panelists told our student audience. Be sure to get out and vote. Make sure you're registered. Make your voice heard. Now, be sure to check back with us next week for another edition of Capture. This has been Landon Troca for Faith Vandervoort. We'll see you next time.